All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great week off last week. I was out of town, so I am still getting situated and trying to catch up on all of the work that I missed. So I hope you're doing well, but now we're back. So here's just a reminder of the rules and expectations for the class. Stay muted if you're not speaking. Use the raise hand button to ask questions or type questions in the chat. I can't always see the questions in the chat, but I do try to get to those, and I have wonderful TAs that are reading those and trying to help people as fast as they can. So outside of class, of course, you can always email me or connect with other students on Discord and ask them questions. We will be using Replit as always, so be sure to go ahead and log into that and have it ready because we're gonna start right on it. Okay, so last time we met, I gave 2 assignments to keep you busy on our week off. The first was this one. It was write Python code that goes through each number less than 10 and prints if the number is divisible by 4 or not. So I will go ahead and show you how I did this. And while I'm doing that, please do raise your hand or put in the chat if you had questions. Oops, this is, oh well, okay. Just erase that. That's what I'm going to show you in class today. Okay, so let's see. We want to go through each number less than 10. So I would consider this starting at 1, since we're printing if it's divisible, and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then print if that is divisible by 4 or not. Now, who remembers how we check if a number is divisible by another number? What operator should we use in Python? Mod, yes, and that symbol is the percent sign. Perfect. So to go ahead and start off, and I hope you can see my screen okay. I realized that I hadn't had it zoomed in, so I'll zoom in a bit and hopefully you can see my screen a bit easier to make the text bigger. Okay, so here we go. So I'm just gonna start with 1. So I'm gonna set num equals 1. And now what do I need to do? What kind of statement do I need to do to check for a certain condition? So if I want to check, so we agreed that we need to check if num mod 4 equal, don't forget double equal 0. But what do I need to have before and after those? Yes, and mod is short for modulo, and it's this percent sign here. So I'm actually going to space that out so that you can read it a bit easier. Yeah, and David, great job. So we're going to have an if statement. And so the important thing about if statements, oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so we're going to have if, and then our condition. You don't need these parentheses, but I like to put them there just so I can see the condition I'm checking. If num mod 4 equals 0, colon, don't forget the colon, that's very important. And I'm going to press enter, and Replit will automatically tab for me. It'll automatically indent, which is what we need after an if statement. So if num mod 4 is equal to 0, then I'm just going to print this number is divisible by 4. So now what do I do if it's not divisible by 4? What do I need? What other statement do I need? I'm going to check on the chat, see? Yeah, so exactly. So we need an else statement. So we don't need an elif because we're just saying it's either going to be divisible by 4 or it's not going to be divisible by 4. So we don't need to really check anything else. So be sure to press. So I'm going to go back here. When I press enter, it still wants me inside that if statement because Replit thinks maybe I'll do something else. If you press enter again, it will get you out of that indentation, which is very important. So now we need to do else, and we can just type out else colon. Colon is very important, and there's no condition with else because this will run if this condition up here is false, and it'll just run no matter what. If this is false, then it's just going to run. It doesn't have any other condition to check. So now we're going to say else. And I don't think we need to do anything. So it says print if the number is divisible by 4 or not. So I can print This number is not divisible by 4. All right, so we've got that. And that's pretty much what we want to do for every number less than 10, which is a bit annoying right now, but when we learn loops, this will be easier. So what we can do with this is we can just take and copy that, and we can just put that there and just change num to equal 2. Do the same thing, change num to equal 3. And we're just going to do this until we get to 9. So num equals 4. And if you want, you could do something like num equals num minus 1 each time, but just to make it clear, when I get to our cutoff number, which is 9, that I don't have to see what num equals at the time. So I'm just going to set it manually myself. 6, 7, 8, 9. So if anybody used ChatGPT to answer this question here, it probably gave you something to do with something we have not learned yet. So if you asked ChatGPT this question and it gave you some code, it probably didn't make sense to you unless you've done programming before. Because this is kind of, we're just copying and pasting a lot. It's not super efficient, but this is exactly how I wanted you to solve with these skills that we've learned so far. We just have an if statement to check if num mod 4 equals to 0, which means it's divisible by 4. Then we're going to print the number is divisible by 4, or else print this number is not divisible by 4. So now if I run this, here we go. And you can see one tiny mistake that I made. It's not really a problem, but I didn't say what number we were on. So I just said this number is not divisible by 4. This number is not divisible by 4. Blah, blah, blah. This number is divisible by 4. So if we wanted to improve this, how could we improve this and show the user what the number is we're talking about? Does anyone have any ideas for how we might? Yeah, so I actually, yeah, good job. So Maya just put that in. And yeah, you could print num plus this number. So that's, you know what it's talking about. Great job. You caught it. So one problem with just doing the plus is that our num right now is an integer. So if you wanted to do something like what Maya was saying, you could do, here, I think you could do print num and then comma. Let's see if that works. Okay, it didn't do that. Okay, so what you could do is you could say print string, because we're going to typecast. Oops. Oh my gosh. Okay. Num equals, I'm just going to print the number up here to make it easier. Okay, so print num. And then if we print it, then we can say this number is divisible by 4. And that breaks it up on different lines. And so you could just add that to all of this code that we wrote here. So now if we do it, it'll just do it for the first one. So 1, this number is not divisible by 4. So that's how you could do that one. And if I copy and paste that for 2, I just want you to see that it'll do it for 2 as well. So if I run this again, 1, this number is not divisible by 4, 2, this number is not divisible by 4. And so if we add that print statement, it will keep going. All right. Yeah, and so people have put some, some other suggestions that they have done. I love that. So did anyone have any particular trouble with this or questions? Totally fine if you did. But if no one has questions on this, then I'll go ahead. I'm not going to do this bonus one right now during the class. If you're interested in it, you can ask me about it. But we can also wait. Assignment 2, assignment 1. Oh, I put these out of order. Whoops. Okay, so that was assignment 1. And then we can go on to assignment 2. But first, are there any questions? Feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, but if you do think of them, you can raise your hand. So for this next one, So for this next one, it says write Python. Oh, yes, Sterling. Sorry, I didn't see your hand was up.
I like to say something about Python.
Okay.
So Python is about what is about Python?
Yeah.
So something great about Python. Python
Yeah.
found winning words, right? Those words, right?
Yes, exactly. So we are going over Python right now, and we're going over some Python code that I assigned to you all a couple weeks ago. Perfect. All right, so our next assignment was write Python code that prints 3 strings in alphabetical order using if statements. So your code should contain 3 strings, string 1, string 2, string 3. It doesn't really matter what the strings are named as long as you keep it consistent what you named them. String 1 is apple, string 2 is cat, and string 3 is tree. And now we're going to use if statements to check if the strings are in alphabetical order. And please do remain muted just so that we don't have any sort of feedback. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's see, I'm going to just delete all of this. Okay, so we have string 1. So the first thing we need is string 1, string 2, and string 3. So I'm going to say string 1. I believe we wanted it to be apple. String 2 equal cat. And string 3 is tree. So we covered last week how we check for strings to be in alphabetical order, and that is by using the less than and greater than signs. So there are a couple ways you could do this. I'll show one way. So I'm going to use some if statements. So I'm going to say if string 1. So if we want it in alphabetical order, we want A is to be first. So we want the first thing that we print to be the lowest. So if string 1 is less than string 2, and I'm going to put this to show you how we could use the keyword and. So if string 1 is less than string 2 and string 1 is less than string 3, colon, print string 1. Now we could do there's a couple ways we could do an elif, but I'm just going to do just some straight if statements. So if string, oh, well, okay, I'll do an elif here and I'll tell you why. Because now we want to check another condition. Elif, so else if, what if string 2 is the lowest string or the first in the alphabet? If string 2 is less than string 1 and string 2 is less than string 3, then we're going to print string 2. And now the last string that we want to check, elif string 3 is less than string 1 and string 3, oops, forgot to close my parentheses, not a big deal, but I like to separate them out. And string 3 is less than string 2, and we're going to print string 3. Okay, so if we just ran this right now, think about what would this print? If we just ran this right now, this would, so I'm just going to run it. This would just print apple. That is because the only statement here, it'll just see the first statement that's true. So string 1 is less than string 2. So apple comes before cat in the alphabet. And apple comes before tree in the alphabet. And it's going to print string 1. It's going to ignore all of the rest of this. It's going to ignore elifs. It's not even going to look at it. And it'll say, okay, there we go. We're done. So we've printed the first word. Now we need to print the second word in the alphabet, which I just realized I made it in order, string 1, 2, and 3. So these are already in alphabetical order. Whoops. But we don't know that they will be. Maybe we could change this to some other word like zebra. But we're going to keep it how it is. So now we're going to start off with another set of if statements. We're going to do just the same thing. So we're going to say if, let's see, string 1 is less than string 2. Sorry, I'm trying to think of how to make this the simplest way to type. if string 1 is less than string 2, and well, my brain just exploded. So we want to find the second one. So if string 1 is less than string 2 and it's greater than string 3. Someone correct me if I did that wrong. For string 1, elif string 2 is less than string 3 and string 2 is less than string 1. No, is greater than. We want to find the middle one. So if it's in between those, I'm seeing a problem. This takes a lot of if and elif statements if we don't use loops. Okay. Now we can say elif string 3 is less than string 1. This took a lot more typing than I meant to make you guys do, but you got some good practice. So let's see, if string 1 is less than string 2 and okay, I'm going to change this to and string 2 is greater than string 1. Sorry, I'm trying to think of this in my head. I had a long day. If string 1 comes before string 2 in the alphabet, and then string 2 comes before string 3 in the alphabet, then it would be 1, 2, 3. But we're checking if 1 is in the middle. So we want string 2 to be less than string 3. Whoa, sorry, y'all. All right. So we want this to be string 1, string 2, string 2, string 3, string 2, string 3, string 3. If this didn't make sense to you, I can talk to you about it afterwards, and I apologize because this was more than I thought I was assigning you, but you should still be able to do it. It's just a lot of typing. Okay, if string 3 is less than string 1 and string 1 is less than string 2.
It's not a lot of typing if you copy paste and change just the greater than and less than symbols.
Yeah, you can.
Except you're not doing that.
Yeah. And string 3. Okay. Let's just test if this works for the second one. So it should do apple and then cat. Oh, syntax error. Forgot a comma. Line 20. Someone see my error? Oh. String 1. You're saying string 1. Oh, yep. Okay, thank you. Yep, I see it. I did string space 1. Thank you. Everyone makes mistakes. Now it did apple, apple. Okay, y'all. I need to think about this more and not while people are staring at me. Yes, Kathleen.
What is the elif statement, the ELIF again?
Yeah, so why don't we just review that? I will come up with I will write the solution for this one and then send it to you all because my brain is just not there right now. But
Okay.
But yes, I'm going to go over the elif just as a review.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, so back to review. I will write that up. It was just a lot for my brain to do on the spot right now. Okay, so just as a review, we have these conditional statements, and this is code that will only run if a condition is true. So we use these comparison operators like equal, equal, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, stuff like that. And these are called if statements. So we have if, a condition, and then a colon. Don't forget the colon, and then we indent and have our code that runs if that condition is true. And then the code outside the if statement is not indented anymore. And if you haven't seen this before, just these little pound symbols are just comments in your code. It's not going to run or anything. It's just for you to write notes to yourself. but do be sure to indent the code inside this if statement. So we have if x equal y, print x is equal to y. So this will only print if x equals y. So it'll look at these two, it'll compare them, and if that's true, it'll do the code that we have down there, no matter what it is. We also have elif statements, and this stands for else if. So it's saying, if this is true, then do this. But else, if this is true, then do this. So it's going to check another condition. So if the first if statement resolves to false, it won't run the code in the if statement, and it'll go check the next condition in the elif statement. So it will only evaluate if the first condition is false. So let's say we have some code. It says if x equals 1, if x is greater than 10, print x is greater than 10. Elif x is less than 5, print x is less than 5. So this is a statement where we're wanting to check two different conditions. We want to check if x is greater than 10, do something, but if x is less than 5, do something else. So this elif will only run if the first if is false. So we're going to say x equals 1 if x is greater than 10. Well, that's false. So we're going to skip this here, go straight to the elif, check whatever condition is here. So now we say x is equal to 1 is 1 less than 5, and it is. So then we're going to do this code here. And then finally, we have an else, and this is the very last one. And so that is, it's not going to check any more conditions. It's only going to run if all of the conditions before it with the if, the elif, any other elifs that you have, else runs if all of those are false. So like if you've heard the phrase when all else fails, that's kind of how I think of it. When all else fails, else will run. So else will run if both the if and elif conditions, are false. So it doesn't have a condition, you just say else and then colon. So in this case, we have x is equal to 11. If x is greater than 10, print this. And it's going to do that because in this case, x is equal to 11. But if we did something like x was in between 5 and 10, because right now we're just checking if it's greater than 10 or if it's less than 5. If we want both of those to be false, we need something between 5 and 10. So we'll do something like 7. So I'll just show you an example of this. So I'm going to have, get rid of all this, x equals 7. No. If x is greater than 10, print x, x is greater than 10. Elif x is less than 5. We're going to print something here. So I'm just going to say x is less than 5. But if both of those are false, then we want to print. And we can choose whatever we want to print. I'm going to print because it makes sense. X is in between 5 and 10. So now if we set x to 7 and we run this, it will print x is in between 5 and 10. So what if we set x to 5? What will it print? Go ahead and put in the chat, what will this print if we set x to 5? Okay, and I see someone had the alphabetizing program working. Thank you so much. I don't know why my brain didn't come up with that. But yes, so if we have this, what will it print if x is equal to 5? Yep, exactly. So you guys got it. I'm gonna see if I could trip anyone up. So if we have it equal to 5, then it's going to still be x is in between 5 and 10 because we just have if x is less than 5. Now, if I set this to less than or equal to, now it includes 5. So we could, now it'll say x is less than 5. Even though that's not really true, it's just going to print out whatever we put inside of this. So don't let the print statement trip you up on what will happen. The condition that we're checking is this one. So is x less than or equal to 5? It is. So it's going to print whatever we put there. Okie doke. So that is a quick overview of what we did 2 weeks ago now, and I know it was a while away, so if we don't quite remember, that's okay. Do we have any questions on this? And we're not going to cover too much new stuff today. We're just gonna keep applying this. So do we have any questions about the if, elif, else statements?
I believe Kathleen had raised her hand before.
I think she already did her question. Kathleen, did you have another question? Okay.
Nope.
Okay,
I'm good.
cool. Awesome. If you do have questions, please do let me know. All right, so we've got, all of this conditional stuff, and really if it's confusing your head, the best thing to do is just to practice. So we will get a bit of that practice in today. But we've talked about, if, elif, else statements, and then we've also done some print statements. What about getting input from a user? So print lets us print text to the console. That lets us send text out. But what if we want to get text? What if we want to have a user enter something and then we use that in our program? We're relying on user input. So what if we want to receive text input from the console? This is where we can use what's called the input statement. So this is another function that we'll learn today. It's called the input statement. So the input statement, at first glance, it's just input, open parentheses, close parentheses. That's all it is. And so this takes text from the console, and without anything, with just input, it's not going to indicate anything. It's just going to silently wait for someone, you, to type into the console. And I'll show you what this looks like. But you don't want it to just have floating off by itself without, I'm covering up. If you didn't have that my string equals here, it wouldn't really do anything if you just put input, because you didn't tell it what to do with that input. So for us to be able to actually use that, we assign it to a variable. So we're going to use the assignment operator to assign that input to a variable. So in this case, I have my string equals input. And in this case, I typed in, so I ran this on Replit. I'll show you in a bit. I ran this on Replit and it just waited and waited and waited. And then I typed in hello and pressed enter. And then it did it. It took this and my string is now equal to hello. So I'll prove that in a bit. So the console will just wait. It won't tell you anything. It's just going to sit there until you enter some text and then press enter. So what does that look like? Let's see. So if I say my string equals input, I'm going to run that. If I just run this, you notice that little arrow thing went away and now it's just sitting there. And it's still running. It's just waiting. It's not giving me any indication that it's waiting, except for I know that I asked for input. So in this case, now I can just start typing. So if I type hello, my name is Miranda. So now I can type and it's still not going to do anything until I press enter. So press the enter key and now it finished. It put that little arrow back and it says, okay, I ran. And all this program did was it assigned whatever thing I typed in here to this string, my string. So that's pretty nice, but what if we want to actually see what we did? Well, then we can print it because we assigned it to a variable. So we can use this just like any other variable that we use. So let's say that we want to take an input and then immediately print out whatever the user entered. So I'm going to say my string equals this input and then print my string. So if I run this, I'm going to say hello, hello. And as soon as I press enter, it's going to continue on in the code. So right now it's at line 1 in our code. As soon as I press enter, it has that input and it moves on to line 2. So if I press enter, it captured my input, saved it to the variable my string, and now it prints it out to the console. So you can pretty much type whatever you want here and it'll save it. And then we can use it. So if you notice, it didn't really say, enter input. And so if you don't know what someone's program does and you just run it and it just seems to sit there and wait for a long time, there's nothing prompting you to enter text, you don't know what the program needs. I mean, unless you wrote it and then you do. But in this case, it's not super useful to just have it waiting with no prompt for you. So in this case, we can pass a string inside the input function. And what I mean is it takes a string as an argument, which is just a fancy coder way of saying you put something in quotes inside of those parentheses there. So if I put my string equals input and then in quotes enter a string, that's the message it's going to show the user whenever you run your program. And then it'll just show that to you, and then whatever you type will be after that. It's still just capturing what you enter into the console, but it's giving you this little message to tell you, you know, what you should be doing. So let's say I want to try that. I can say my string equals input, enter a string, and then it'll take whatever I do. So if I do colon and space, it'll put a colon and space there. So let's say enter a string. I'm going to enter hello world, press enter, and now it runs and it prints out my message. It says hello world. So notice that spacing here matters in what you put here. So if I just said enter a string without any spaces, let's run that and see what happens. It'll say enter a string, and then whatever I start typing is not spaced out. So it kind of looks a little weird. It still works, but it doesn't really look nice to someone to say enter a string hello, hello, hello. So in this case, we like to put, you know, a colon and a space usually after this input message so that it just looks a little nicer and it's easier to read, just like that. All right, so that is the input function. Do we have any questions about that? Yeah, and so it says, yeah, what is your social security number? Yeah, don't ever give anyone that. So it'll just print
Confidential
whatever we have here.
information.
Yeah, there's some ethics that goes into this. Okay, so as a question, so what data type is the input from the console? So when I have my string, what is that data type? This my string variable. What is the data type, or how could we check what the data type is? Yeah, so it's a string. So even if I enter a number, it's still going to be a string. And we can check this with the type function. So if you remember, we covered this briefly, but we can use the type function, and all that is type, and then in parentheses, you put the variable that you want to check the type of. So we can print the type of the input to see what type that is. And I did name it my string, so I kind of gave it away, but we could have them enter a number and it would still be, the variable would still be called my string. So print my string and then print type my string. So if I run this, it's going to wait for me to enter a string. I'm going to enter 9,000, whoops, enter, and then it prints it for me, and it's a string. So notice, even though I entered a number, it's still coming back as a string into our program here. So that's something very important to remember about the input function, is it always comes back as a string. But what if we want numerical input? What if we want to convert whatever the user entered? We could ask them their age. We could ask them for you know, how many cats they have. How could we convert that user input into an integer? And we did cover this 2 weeks ago. So does anyone remember what we use when we want to convert one data type to another data type? What should we do? Go ahead and put in the chat if you have an idea. Yeah, great. So it's called typecasting, and we're going to type int and convert it that way. So it's kind of like a little function in itself. So let's say that we want to turn this into an integer. I'm going to say my int equals int, open parentheses, and then I've just passed in the variable that I want to convert. So I'm converting a string to an int. I'm going to say my int equals int my string. And just to check, I'm now going to print the type of my int to make sure that this did work. So if I run this now, enter a string, I'm just going to enter a number. Press enter, 1009. It's a string at first, and then we convert it. And now it is an integer. Awesome. This will break, however, if you put a string, if you actually enter a string and you say hello, it's not going to be able to convert that to an integer. See, it gets mad. It says invalid literal for int with base 10. That's saying this is not a number because it's a bunch of letters, so I can't convert it to an int. So in something like this is where your message to the user is very important. So you can say enter a number, and then you're hoping that the person using your program will use it correctly. We will get into how to check that, input. So enter a number, I'm going to say 10. And it'll show me that it converts it to an int. Of course, I still could enter a string if I decided to break the program. But hopefully with these instructions, I'm a good person and I still enter a number. All right, and so this slide is kind of just a screenshot of doing just that. So if we convert it and then we can print it there. Yes, Sterling, do you have a question?
About question about user being about learning things. About 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Years old. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So that's the next part we're gonna do. Awesome. Yep. Sterling's ready. Sterling is ready to go to this exercise here. So before we talked about getting a number from a user and then how we could convert that to an integer. And one way that we can use that is if we want to do something like check if they are old enough for something. So if we want to check if the user is 18 years or older, we could use some of the things that we've used before, such as if statements, to check for something like that. And we are able to convert their input from a string to an integer to be able to run those comparisons. So go ahead and think about what would we want our code to look like. So if we ask a user for their age, and then we're going to check if they're 18 years or older. If they are, we want to print you are a legal adult. But if they enter that they are younger than 18, then we're going to print you are not a legal adult. So how should we do this? Go ahead and put your ideas into the chat. You don't have to have full code, just put how you would go ahead and start on this exercise here, and then we'll all do it together. So what should we do if we want to check a user's input and see if they're 18 years and older? Gonna give everyone some time to think about it. Okay, waited a couple seconds, and yeah, I've got awesome ideas in the chat and they are all correct. So yes, we want to do an if, we want to use an if or else statement. We also want to convert that input to an integer. Awesome job. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're going to check. Amazing, amazing. Thank you, everyone. All right, ask user for their age, check if they are 18 years or older. Okay, so let's make a variable. I'm going to call the variable age and say age equals, what do I put here? Age equals what? Go ahead and put in the chat, what do I put after age equals? If I want to get, if age is going to be something that the user enters from the console, I'm not going, it might change each time a different person runs it or a person enters different numbers. So what do I put after age equals? Yeah, exactly. So this is where we use our input. And so you can go ahead and convert this to an integer. I'm going to do it one step at a time. So I'm going to say age equals input. Very important. This is the function we're using. Input, enter your age. That's the message I want to put. You can put whatever message you want, but it's the most useful when it's short and tells the user what to do. So we're going to say age equals input, enter your age. So now if I want to convert that to an integer, I can just reassign it. So I can say age equals int age. So in this case, I didn't change the name of the variable. I could change it. I could call it age int, but I wanted to show you this because you don't have to change the name of the variable to make sure that you're always using the correct variable. You can just say age equals int age. So this is going to take whatever the user puts in and then converts it to an integer, and we're still going to call it by the same name. All right, so now we want to check if they are older than if they are 18 or older. So that would be a greater than or equal to operator. So what do I type right here? I'm going to type if age is greater than or equal to 18, colon, don't forget the colon, enter, indent. Now we're going to print, you are a legal adult. And now do I want an else statement or an elif statement? Let's see, what did people put before? Yeah, so people are just saying if else statement, and that's great. So we don't really need an elif statement because we don't need to check another condition. We're just checking one thing. Are they 18 years or older? If yes, then do this. If no, we don't need to check any other conditions. So we're just going to put else, print, you are not a legal adult. Sad. All right. So now if I run this, let's see what happens. So let's test our code here. So enter your age. First, I'm going to do 18. Let's see if this works. 18. You are a legal adult. All right, that works. What if I do, let's do something greater than 18. I'll do 100. You are a legal adult. All right, run it again. Let's try something less than 18. 17. You are not a legal adult. And I'll try it with a negative number. It's always good to just try a bunch of things when you're testing your code. You're not a legal adult if you're a negative 10. Okay, and then yet again, the user could enter, you know, pretzel, and then it gives an error. All right, and there are some ways we could get around that. We haven't gotten to that yet, but you could get around that. But for now in the class, we're just going to assume that people are using your code like they should use it, and they are inputting a number. So don't worry about thinking about all of the scenarios of what someone could input. We're just going to assume that they're going to input a number. Awesome. So that is how we could do this. So the last thing that I have is this assignment, and we can take the last 15 minutes of class to work on it. And I'll go over that. But before we think about this assignment, do we have any questions? Thank you so much for your participation in the chat. I really love, I'm just making sure I'm not missing any questions, but I really love seeing all of the answers. But yeah, so someone is saying, what if they just type, you know, the word version of their, like type out 18, it's gonna do an error. So yeah, we're just kind of trusting them. Yep, thank you, Brendan. Yep, we're just trusting. Okay, so feel free to raise your hand if you do have questions or message one of us. This assignment that I have here, which will take a little bit of time to work on at the end of class, is to write a program that calculates the total price for someone buying movie tickets if these movie tickets are $11 each. So what you're going to do is ask the user to enter the number of movie tickets they would like to buy and then print out the total price. Got a little bit of math here, a little bit of math. So just a little note, you don't need to include tax or any other price besides movie tickets. We're not going to look at popcorn prices, just the movie ticket price. If you would like to make this more complicated, you can include tax, but I'm not requiring you to do that because tax is different everywhere. But you could make up tax if you want to. But as an extra, after you do this, so we'll do this part first, and then as an extra, what if the theater has a discount if you order more than 20 tickets? But first, do this first part here where you're just writing a program that calculates total price for someone buying movie tickets if movie tickets are $11 each. You're going to ask the user to enter the number of movie tickets they'd like to buy and then print out that total price. So if you would like to, you are we ended according to my clock 13 minutes early, so you can take the next 13 minutes to work on this. If you want me to, I can open a breakout room for people to work on it all together, or you can just sit in this main room and work on it yourself and ask questions as you have them. And as with all of the assignments, I'll go over this and write my answer to it better than I did today. I'll write my answer to it on Thursday when we have class again. So the remaining class time is for if you have questions or if you just want to quietly work on this assignment. All right, I'm proud we ended early today. I think I've been over at least a minute over every time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but if you'd like to stay and work on the assignment, you're welcome to.